Okay, I confess. The weather is actually nice outside. And yet, here I am, recording indoors. Why? Great question. Honestly, probably because I don't want to deal with the random interruptions, the landscapers and dogs barking, all that stuff. Because every time they kind of interrupt, I gotta stop recording and kind of readjust. And well, yes, I can edit it out because that's typically what I do. It just makes it for a easier, smoother process. So we are indoors today. But with that said, let's let's jump into today's topic, huh? Profound statements. When you think of a profound statement, usually the reaction when you first hear like a profound statement is something along the lines of, whoa, that's good. I gotta remember that. Or, yeah, right? Something like that. But if we think about this, what about when we hear a profound statement that sounds profound, but when really analyzed or thought about more, it turns out that it may or may not actually be profound. Well, I got this thought from this podcast I was watching from the Whoa, That's Good podcast, hosted by Sadie Robertson Huff. Her and her husband were talking to a NBA player, Jonathan Isaac. He's also the founder of this Christian apparel company, Unite Us. But she asks every guest that comes on her podcast. Well, that's what really this clip is that I'm going to show you. And this will kind of really show and peel back what we're talking about. So, first, listen to Jonathan Isaac's answer and think to yourself if that sounds profound or if that is profound. And hang on to that thought. And then we're going to come back and I'm going to give my thoughts on it. So, check this out.
More, but before we get into all that, I have to ask you the question I ask everyone who comes on the Let's Go podcast for the first time. And if you aren't prepared for this, it will come out of left field. But the question is, Jonathan, what's the best piece of advice that you've ever been given?
Yes, I was very prepared for this.
I love
this. So I got the drop, and I was thinking, there's so many different things, but I was like, what is something that has replayed in my mind for a really long time? And there was two, but there's one that it really profound, and it says, "What you are not changing, you're choosing."
Oof. Wow, that's good.
And that one always stings because I think for me it's like, you grow up and you have trauma, you have all of these things that are a part of the way that you are. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of times where it can feel like it's somebody else's fault or not completely your responsibility to tend to or to try to change or to try to work on. And a lot of times we look at God, this is how I am. This is how you made me. This is the things that I've been through. But it's like, when we really get to the nitty gritty of it and kind of look at ourselves in the mirror, it's hard to come to that realization that, man, what I'm not actively putting into process and trying to strategize and kind of just being intentional about changing, I am choosing those outcomes, even when they are detrimental to myself or I've justified them or have kind of sat in those conclusions. I'm choosing that.
Man.
And, yeah.
That is good.
That is really good.
That
it
is
hurts.
so good. That hurts. I love how you said, yeah, that one stings. That does. I was thinking about
Okay, so before I actually give my thoughts on that clip, I first want to put the definition of profound up on the screen. And I want to focus on the second definition, the one that basically is like knowledge or understanding or insight, demonstrating like knowledge or understanding. And then if you look up a profound statement, it's basically saying the same thing, but it just says like a knowledge or understanding of serious matters. So, with that framework and that understanding, now I want to dive into the clip that y'all saw. Remember when Jonathan said that? Christian's reaction? He said, "Whoa." Now, that's usually one of the reactions that you will get when somebody says something profound. But if we look at that statement, well, it is true that what you're not changing, you're choosing. That is true. I think sometimes we can hear that and we're like, yeah, wow, I didn't realize that, but yeah, what I'm not changing, I'm choosing. I'm choosing to stay there. I didn't even realize that, but yeah. I think we forget, though, that also deciding to change, that's a choice. And some of you watching are probably like, well, no, duh, that doesn't really need to be said because clearly, if you're deciding to change, you have to think about it, so it is a choice. Yes, yes, it is. But deciding not to change and deciding to change, it's both a choice. So, what you're not changing, you're choosing, because that's a choice not to change, to stay where you're at. But then to make a decision to try something new, do something else, reinvent yourself, that is also a choice. Everything that we do in life, everything, who we marry, where we work, where we live, what friends we have, who we worship, it's all a choice. It all comes down to a choice. Are we going to do this or not? Are we going to do this or not? It's all a choice. Everything that we do is a choice. Remember the video that I did about life and death? If you haven't seen it, I'll link it up in the corner. But God even gives us a choice between life and death. And everything that we do in life really ultimately stems from one of those. Are we choosing life or are we choosing death? If we decide to worship money, if we decide to worship people, that's choosing death. If we decide to worship God, if we decide to follow God, if we decide to help others and serve others because that's what God says, so that's choosing life. Everything that we do, it's a choice. So choosing not to change, it's a choice. And choosing to change, it's a choice. So I just wanted to remind you that just because this statement is profound and it just maybe catches you off guard a little bit when you hear it, whoa, what you're not changing, you're choosing, does not mean that changing is not also a choice. So just think about that. What we don't change, we're choosing. And what we do change, we are also choosing. Everything's a choice. So, I guess that just leaves me to ask one question. What are you choosing? What are you choosing to follow, worship, do in life? What is your choice? Because we all have a choice. And I hope we make the right one. So, with that said, thank you guys so much for watching and for tuning in this week. I hope this helped, and I hope you weren't really confused and kind of thrown for a loop with all of that. I hope this kind of actually made sense. And for most of you, you're probably like, that was really nothing new. I already knew that. Well, that's great. I'm glad that you were already on track. But I wanted to just really put this together and put this out there for those that probably didn't realize it, that probably needed to hear that reminder. So I thank you guys again for tuning in this week and for staying subscribed to the channel and for supporting the channel. Let me know in the comments if this helped at all, if you really needed to hear this reminder, or perhaps maybe you already knew and you're one of the ones that really didn't need this reminder. You already knew that everything that you do is a choice. So, but regardless, I thank you again for tuning in, and you guys stay safe, and I'll see you next week.